All right. Ooh, Gretchen, what's is that your readiness? Yeah, so today is one of the more troubling stories we have in our scripture today. And I gave you a warning at the end of last week that this is in some ways the number one text of terror. That it is in some ways it is a very difficult read, at least for me, and very troubling. And I'm curious just at the outset what you all think of this story in Judges chapter 19.
Well, it certainly establishes the status of women in this time that it was written.
Yeah, we certainly, that's a good way to put it. We get a look into exactly how much power women had.
I think the sentence they raped her till she died is the worst sentence there. It shows that rape has been used for a very long time as a thing of war. I don't know why they did it. I don't know. We don't have background on why there was problems with Benjamin and this person, but I didn't pick up on it, but it seems like it was sort of normal to be slaughtering people. So
we will get into the context, and
yeah.
Unfortunately, whether or not she dies or at what point in the story she dies is actually contested, and that's one of the more disturbing elements of it.
Well, the end of the last chapter says that he found her on his doorstep, and in this one, he had gone. The story seemed.
Hold it in your head. We're gonna get to it because these are important details. It is important I'm just pointing it out that there is questions around this, and you rightly picked it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw Mary Ellen's hand and then Gretchen.
That's what I was going to say.
Pass it by. Keep going.
Okay. All right, Gretchen.
No, I was just going to say I think Mary Ellen had her hand up. Oh. Gotcha. Sorry. Do you want comments on this?
Oh, just some initial thoughts of this story and what it was like to read it.
I see it. Yeah, Gary, let Gary go.
Well, thank you. As horrible as it was, the thing that really bothered me for 2 days since I read it, I guess, is what is its purpose? Why is it in here? I just couldn't figure out, and I was very anxious to get here this morning and have Chris explain to me why it's of value in the Bible.
Yeah, I was going to say too, after all that series of sermons about what's not in the Bible, why in heaven's name is something like this in our Bible?
Well, it was sort of more of the same, it seemed to me. Yeah. I forgot that you had said it was especially violent. And Yahweh, or the God, sent them back into battle twice, knowing that, without giving them a different strategy, and so more people got killed. It seemed a little strange. So
yeah, Gretchen.
I think this is often used, I mean, maybe not spoken of, but as a subtext for the reason that gays have been excluded from society.
Oh yeah,
from all of life.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, kind of like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, this does have questions of sexuality around it, and that's one of the things that I think is important to discuss, is what is the role of sex, and especially sexual assault, because there is I would argue two major camps of argumentation of how sexuality is being used in this text. So yeah, sexuality is also a big thing to talk about in this one. All right. So with that in mind, let's jump into this disturbing text and actually pick apart the pieces to understand what exactly is going on here. The first, I won't go into it. I believe I assigned it for today is a refresher on the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I made that connection explicitly because a lot of the details are reminiscent of it. I'm not going to run through the story of Sodom and Gomorrah this time. It was more just so you all can see the story similarities, which are likely not accidental. A lot of the same language is used. The format of the story is very similar. And all of this is likely a callback to Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's just thinking about the similarities, are there any off the bat that just pop out of you that are like threads that are in both of these stories? Yeah, Gretchen.
Well, the threat of not offering hospitality.
Right.
And that's one of the things that people sometimes talk about this shows the importance of hospitality, and both of these are negative examples of not offering hospitality. Although in the second story, you almost think that the father has something against this person by keep saying, "Oh, stay another day." You can just see them getting drunker as the time goes on.
Right. So we have the role of like the value of hospitality, which like we still have it as a cultural value, but it's not the same as in the ancient world that if you see someone sleeping outside, you take them in. And that has a role to play in this story, and it also has a major role to play in the Sodom and Gomorrah story. Other parallels that are striking between the two stories.
The fact that the verse number is the same.
Oh yeah.
So as much as I would love to draw a parallel with that one, as I discussed a few sermons ago, there was just some guy who numbered these stories, so it's likely accidental. Yeah, so we have the hospitality. I would also argue we have the offering of women in substitute. I mean, you have like the town coming out demanding to get to know the guest, and the women being offered up as a substitute.
A substitute, which is the subtext for the opposition to.
Right. The thing to know straight off the bat, though, is what is the main difference between these two stories? There's like two or three main differences between Sodom and Gomorrah and the story that we have. Yeah, Gretchen?
Well, I think the Sodom and Gomorrah story, as I remember, one of the things about it is it's kind of it's an example of a story that explains why something is like it is. And it explains why there are all those pillars of salt and the salt sea in it. And the pillars of salt in that area of the world are because she turned back. So there's kind of a different underlying meaning to this as far as what it's used for. And I haven't figured out. I'm with Gary. I haven't figured out yet what the other story is used for.
A way to say that in a different way is this story is a different genre than Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is more in the genre of explanation myth. mythos. There's a more technical term than that. I don't have it on the top of my head, but it's kind of like the story of Noah explains why we have rainbows. It's in the realm of that kind of explanation mythos, where this story that we have is more in the realm of history, more as we understand it today. I won't say that it's 100% like verifiable historical fact like we would fact check history today, but it is in more of the historical realm versus the mythological legend realm. So in the story, though, I'm going to just pull out two differences that will become important. First is in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is notably not an Israelite town. It's not a town associated with the worship of the Israelite God. It is not inhabited by Israelites. It is a town of depravity that is against Abraham's family, because it was in the time of Abraham and Lot. And the second big difference is this town was so depraved that God was going to destroy it. The visitors are not normal human beings, but messengers from God, i.e. angels. So in Sodom and Gomorrah, we have angelic visitors and in a Canaanite town, whereas in this story, we have a Levite visiting an Israelite town. So pulling out those things are important to see some of the parallels and the connections that the story is going to make. With that, let's go to verse 1 and dive in. So this is the second of two stories talking about a Levite. This Levite is different than the Levite we talked about last week. Last week we had a southern Levite that went north. This time we have a northern Levite that's going south. This Levite is evidently established enough in life to have a concubine. This term can also just mean a secondary wife. He is referred to as both her master and her husband, but this does seem to be like it is not just a sex slave. She does appear to have some wifely status, although it does seem to be secondary. But what we see is in verse 2, there is discord in the couple. And this is where your translation is your mileage may vary. And where in this whole story, there's a lot of Hebrew that is getting massaged out because there's a lot of euphemisms being used. Because the Hebrew, or my text says, she got angry with him, and so she left for her father's house. The Hebrew says she prostituted herself and left for her father's house. And I know in some versions it says that he got mad at her, and so she left for her father's house. So how to translate this seems to be up for debate, because by verse 3, he is going to her, which why this mileage may vary, it seems like she was the offended party because he goes to her for reconciliation. So this is our setup. Secondary wife is taken, secondary wife leaves because there's some kind of conflict, and then he goes to her and her father's house to make up. So what are you imagining in this whole setup between the conflict between the husband going to her father's house to get her back? What are you thinking about what's going on with this couple? Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Well, it mentions that she was gone for 4 months.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, that must be significant, and put it in the text, but it took him that long before he decided to go try to reconcile. I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Of course, the going wasn't easy. He had to take 2 donkeys and a servant to get there. So travel, it must have been some sort of arduous journey for him to require all of that to do.
And yet you think how arduous the journey was for the secondary wife to return to her father's house, whether she was sent there or whether she chose to go. How did she do that? And Mary Ellen has this term prostituted in her. I mean, how do women make money in order to travel, or how do you do it? So yeah, it's interesting. It's quite a journey, and I love that one thing where he said he set out after her to speak tenderly to her and bring her back. And that's, oh, isn't that sweet? I mean, really, I just have a kind of a good feeling right there.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so this man is setting out. Evidently 4 months was enough to realize either he missed her or he really did need a second wife. So he's going to go speak tender words. The 2 donkeys and a servant is more than just accompaniment making the travel easier. It's showing that he's wealthy. You're gonna show up at your father-in-law's house, you're gonna do it in style, especially if you messed up. Show up looking nice. So he's gonna bring the servant, he's gonna bring his donkeys, he's gonna show up. And so going back to your father's house was very common for women in unhappy situations because, like, yes, you as women, as Gretchen, as you pointed out, there's not a lot of ways to support yourself. So, but her dad seems more than excited that, hey, look, your hubby has come to get you.
He's glad for her to leave.
Yeah.
She's another burden on his life. We got her married and out of the house and somebody else to take care of her. And now, by gosh, she's back.
Well, there's also there's like 2 layers to that. Yeah, first of all, I have to feed another mouth again. I thought we got rid of you. But the secondary thing, if you want to give a little bit more tender reading to the father, the father is likely older than the husband and will die first. And so it's one of those, for long-term stability, it is better for her to be with her husband who can take care of her longer than the dad is likely going to be able to. So the dad, this is where we see hospitality come into play. So they wine and they dine. The men are having a good old time together. The father is showing all the hospitality. And then on the 4th day, they rise to get up early, but the father insists, oh no, it's so early. Come, eat, drink with me. And so the husband stays because it's an insult to turn down it's not only an insult to not be offered hospitality, it's an insult to turn it down. And so he stays. And then it gets to be late enough in the day that the dad's like, oh, no. It's late enough. Stay here another night. It's fine. So is this the dad just showing hospitality, caring, or do you all think he's being maliciously showing hospitality here?
Well, it certainly suggests the father has some underlying reason for this protracted insistence that they remain, because this is going on 5 days now, and he just came to pick up his wife, and the father keeps insisting for him to stay. Why?
And we all know that after 3 days, it's like fish.
Yeah.
But thank you for saying that. I find that puzzling too. What's in it for the father? What's the point here?
I almost wondered if the father was going to kill the husband.
You insulted my daughter. I will have this plan of hospitality to do you in. It is unclear, and it never says why the father is doing this. So all we have is conjecture. It may just be that the father, since the husband showed up with his donkeys and servants, that the father may be trying to one-up him in hospitality. It may just be that he really likes this guy. We don't know.
Well, if you
But
take it at face value, it's all very happy and everything's going well. If you don't look for underlying reasons, but at face value, it looks good.
yeah. Yeah, there may be no underlying. You're entirely right, Helen. This may just be a very kind person.
I'm always looking for the good in everybody.
Always look on the bright side of life, as Monty Python says.
Just another Pollyanna.
Uh-huh.
It helps us.
Sometimes the best, or what is it, good intentions are sometimes the highway to hell.
Yeah.
Or the best.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is actually the thing that sets up the situation that they're going to get into. So on the 5th day, they still wine and dine in the morning, so they don't get the early start they want to, so they get a late start. And so they take off on their journey. And by verse 10, it's getting to be the point where they need to find somewhere to sleep. And they're close to a town called Jebus. Jebus is the same town and place that will become Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not yet an Israelite city, which means it is a Canaanite city. And so the servants are saying, hey, we're right next to the city. It's getting late. Let's go and find lodging there. And the Levite says, no. We're not staying at that town. We're going to keep going, and where he wants to end up is an Israelite town. And so let's pass by this one because I want to stay in the Israelite city where theoretically his people are. So this is where where the comparison between Sodom and Gomorrah comes up. And so I'm curious what you all think about the decision, pass up the Canaanite city. We're going to keep trekking on until we get to the Israelite city. At face value, why is the husband making this decision?
He'd do it for safety reasons. He feels that he wouldn't be safe in this particular town, or they wouldn't. But if he gets to where there are Israelites, that they will take care of.
Yeah. On the nose, safety. Yeah, Gretchen?
Well, and there's another thing about this. Jebus, the people of Jebus are not looked upon kindly. And we'll see this later in them going into Israel, conquering and using, it becomes the city of the Lord and all of that wonderful thing. But initially, Jebus is not a good place.
Yeah, Mary.
The commentary in the bottom of my Bible says Jerusalem as a city of foreigners is ironically rejected in favor of fellow Israelites. So he isn't choosing the foreigners. He wants to be back with his own people.
Yeah.
Good.
Right. So this is why the comparison to Sodom and Gomorrah is important, because Sodom and Gomorrah was in a Canaanite town. And so that story theoretically would be known by the Israelite people of this nephew of Abraham, their common ancestor, stayed in a Canaanite town, or like lived in a Canaanite town, and look at the depravity of this Canaanite town. So this guy may be thinking of this story and it's like, nope, we are not making that decision. We're not staying in the Canaanite town, because remember what happened in that one town. And so instead, they keep trekking on, and they make it to Gibeah. That's probably how you pronounce it, Gibeah. And so they reach Gibeah, and they're sitting in the town square, and no one is taking them in. So right off the bat, put on your ancient Israelite hats. After hearing the story of the father who kept insisting on more and more hospitality, what are you thinking of Gibeah in a town now, in an Israelite town that's giving no hospitality?
Bad.
Not a friendly place.
No.
And those Gibeonites are not good Israelites.
Well, he must have wondered what was going on. What was the reason?
Yeah, so this alone would have been an outrage in the story. Like, you have one of your own people, even if it wasn't of your own tribe, this is a Levite. And Levites were generally recognizable. And by the law of Moses, Levites, especially Levites, were supposed to be taken in since they don't have land of their own. This is one of the priestly classes of people. When they come, you let them in. And so he is sitting in the town square, and the city is ignoring him. Not good. But then an older man comes in off the hills. He probably was tending to livestock outside of like where the city would be. And this old man sees the Levite and says, "Hey, do you need a place to stay?" In which the Levite comments that, "Hey, we're just passing through." He says that they are on their journey home, but they have enough straw for their donkeys, enough bread and wine for the people. Like, we're good. He's like, "Hey, we prepared enough. We have all of our supplies." But the old man says, "You need a roof over your head. Come with me." So, at first, the Levite does a very traditional thing of like, "Oh no, I don't need your hospitality." That's actually a fairly common practice of like denying the hospitality, and then the insisting on the hospitality is showing that you are genuinely offering. And so after the old man offers a second time, the party agrees that they are going to go with this old man to his house, which is where the next situation starts taking place. So the old man and the Levite, wining and dining, also having a lovely time, when the men of the town arrive and start banging on the door. So they call out, "Bring out the man who came to your house." The Hebrew says, "so that we may know him." And that is another euphemism. To know someone in this context is to have sex with them. So he's saying, "Hey, bring out this man. We saw you bring in a foreigner or like an outsider. We see you have a visitor. Bring him out. We want to know him."
It says here in my translation, "have intercourse with him."
It is because the Hebrew is using a euphemism, but it's very blatant that this is what they want. So that will be, that's the translation I have too. But
other than Sodom and Gomorrah, was such sexuality a common thing in Israelite culture at that time?
So this is where the discussion of homosexuality comes up. Are these people attracted to men, wanting to have loving relationships with other men, and like getting married, settling down, and like raising a family? Or is the sex in this story acting in a different way? So what evidence we see in the ancient world is the idea of homosexuality is just completely unknown. It's one of those that you got married and you had kids because that was your livelihood. Didn't matter what your sexual orientation was, you were going to get married and you were going to try to have a family because that is status, that is your retirement plan, that is your wealth. And so rather than getting married because two people love each other and they love each other so much they want to share that love with a child, that is a very modern idea. And so most commentators will say this is not about love, about committed relationships. This is about power and domination. And that's what we do see in the ancient world, where this is sex being used as a weapon to humiliate a outsider, to show that they have power over anyone who comes to town. What you also see in the ancient world, which is why specifically the Hebrew texts don't look kindly to male-on-male sexual relationships, is the common practice that we see is that older men would apprentice younger men and would sexually dominate them, which we would call today pedophilia. And I am 100% against that. But that was mostly the male on male sexual relations that they would understand is either power and domination or an older man taking advantage of a younger boy in like an apprentice style relationship. This was particularly common in like more Hellenistic culture that evolves into the Greek culture. And it would just be known that when the younger boy who was taken advantage of grew up and got more status and rank, he would then do the same thing. And the cycle of violence continues. But they would not have an idea of a romantic same-sex couple. So if there was same-sex sexual relationships, the Bible doesn't talk about female and female sexual relationships. It is only male with male. The other egregious thing that we've talked about before is this violates men's property rights. It basically puts them in the level of a servant. And so these men are thought to be wanting to make this man lower in status, essentially saying they have subjugated a Levite. Okay. If that, yeah, Larry?
So the motivation of the crowd, of men is because this guy is a quote foreigner, even though he's an Israelite. And so we're doing this, we could kill him or we could hang him or we could beat him, but we've chose this method to sort of prove our dominance.
Correct.
Okay. That makes more sense.
So there's a mirror. So what's interesting is we have back-to-back stories of unnamed Levites. We know they are two different Levites because they come and go from different locations. But we see, when you have two stories like that, it is often an indication that you're supposed to compare them. And so in the previous story, we see someone set up a shrine, kind of, or install his own son as a priest, and then when the Levite comes to town, he says, hey, come be a priest at my personal shrine. And then here's this other story where a Levite comes to town and the people say, hey, we want to subjugate you and make you basically our servant. And so what parallels are you seeing between these two stories of outsider or a Levite from a different area comes to town and the place where they go, the locals have their own plan. So where are the parallels and where are the differences?
I was just thinking that both of these speak about the outsidedness of the Levites, that in neither story, it's not a positive story about either one of the Levites. It was there like it's just like a way of saying that the Israelites' religious practices were deteriorating so that they weren't respecting and taking care of those who were their priests by so that's something to say about the culture that they've rejected the whole order of life by not attending to and taking care. And on the other hand, the Levites haven't done a very good job themselves, going in and setting up. And so it is a kind of a Levite in a little bit of trouble with our image of them is kind of, it's worn down a little bit. It's tarnished with these stories of Levites. That's too much, but
yeah. Yeah, I think that observation is poignant in that we're almost, while we have the status of Levites enshrined in the Torah, in the law of Moses, people aren't following it. People are setting up their own shrines, and here people are willing to subjugate the like priestly class of people. I think an important observation about this of like why this degradation is happening can be seen in the first verse of this chapter. In those days when there was no king in Israel. So they're going to diagnose the problem right at the start. There's no king in Israel. So what would a king in Israel prevent this? And if so, why and how? Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Well, if there were a king, he would attempt to standardize, if there's such a word, his kingdom so that, in a unification kind of a process, a king, in my mind, would want the same thing happening across his kingdom, so that he would be setting in some rules and some standards and some expectations of the people, and could possibly control this kind of a thing, banning it, do whatever, a king would do. But without a king, they're on their own. And they're just doing their own thing. And, it kind of is sitting in my head that this Levite passed up a town of foreigners to come to a town where they were his people. And yet his people are treating him this way. And I question whether he knew this was possible before he entered the town, or whether this caught him by surprise as well, because I don't know, I don't see him walking into this willingly, but anyway.
Yeah, and so another spot on observation. Yeah, the king basically, by standardizing something, could standardize protections for people. That it's one of those, when you have a widespread set upon of agreed, like, stepping back, theoretically they have a rule book, but they have no enforcing agent in their code of ethics. And so they've set up the Levites to be a class of people in their code of ethics, but there's no enforcing agency if people don't follow it. And so I think you're right in that the Levite is making a choice to go to his people because theoretically They have a code of ethics that they've agreed to. We're not going to the foreigners because we don't know what ethics they're using. We're going to our people because we agree, right? And what he finds is no, actually, these people are as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah. That is once again the parallel, that he went to his own people, but this town is as bad as the cities that were destroyed.
It seems that they haven't internalized any of the laws. They haven't. It's as though if someone's not standing next to them with a stick, they're not going to do the right thing. It's just weird. I mean, it goes over and over and over and over again, and then once in a while, Yahweh comes in, and he's no better. He's telling them to kill people. I mean, it's what happened to.
Yeah.
I think I read the wrong. I just reread chapter 19. What was the assignment? I thought it was 20 and 21.
No, it was just 19 for today.
Oh, 19. Okay, well, I read most of 19 anyway, but because I couldn't understand what was going on in 20.
All right. But Larry, what was your thoughts?
Well, I think this again is an indication that as far as governance is concerned, you're dealing with 11 independent city-states. There is no central government.
Right.
And that's why they need a king.
So, have you all heard of the shopping cart theory of morality?
No.
So I heard about this. It was being talked about during the pandemic because it was a thought experiment of, can we trust people to self-govern? Can we trust people to do the right thing because it's the right thing? And someone brought up the shopping carts. So here's the shopping cart theory of morality. Number one, everyone agrees, more or less, that returning the shopping cart to the little shopping cart stations is the morally correct thing to do. That, like, they are there for you to return your shopping cart. And it's not one of those explicit rules. There's not signage about it, but the implication is after you're done with your shopping cart, you put it in the shopping cart place so it doesn't roll and hit a car, it doesn't get in the way, it doesn't block parking spots. Everyone knows that is the morally correct thing to do. However, there is also no punishment if you do not return your shopping cart to the little shopping cart depot unless you shop at Aldi, because they make you put in a token of a quarter that you get back if you return it. So Aldi is different, but most American grocery stores, there's not a punishment if you leave it 2 parking lots away. And so it's one of those, it's a question of, can people govern themselves? And what I see all the time is people don't return their shopping carts. And
they
so it's
do it. Trader Joe's is you very rarely see a shopping cart. That's very interesting.
But so the thought is, are you willing to do something that is not punishable? No one punishes you if you don't do the thing. It is agreed upon as the morally correct thing to do, but you also get no reward for doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So can you govern yourself to do the right thing when no one is watching and there is no reward? Clay, did I see a hand go up? Oh.
This is kind of tangential. I went to return a shopping cart for someone who was loading groceries in the handicapped area at Bush's, right? Very near the store. And when I went to do that as a help, she said, I leave this here on purpose so that when someone who is handicapped gets out, they have a cart to lean on to get into the store. And I went, aha. Okay, and I have since seen that where shopping carts are left there by the handicapped area. So like I said, it's very tangential, but that just
know that.
It's kind of like another right thing to do, but seemed like it wasn't until it was explained to me. And then I thought that makes a lot of sense. So anyway, like I said, very tangential to what you're saying,
Yeah.
and yet sort of fits in.
Yeah, Helen, then
I always take my shopping cart back. Now I'm going to worry about parking in the handicap and not leave.
Actually, the handicap spaces allow for space to do that. There's a lot of space between the cars and even toward the pavement for the drive-through. There's always plenty of room to do it. And if you push it up against a post, it's not going to go anywhere. I always do that when I park in a handicap spot. And it's like, yeah, I think somebody, I mean, if I were coming up there and saw a cart and it was stuck there, I think, wow, great. And it doesn't bother me at all to leave a cart there because I know that that's what's done and what's easy, and there's a space for it.
So why I bring this up is kind of a modern thought experiment is, in a way, I feel like the tribes are trying out self-governance. Can the 12 tribes get it together to do the thing that they have all theoretically, in the story, they have all agreed to follow the Torah? Can they actually do it without an overarching structure like a king to give them guidance? Yeah, Helen?
Probably not. If there's something in one place that makes it economically better for them to do a certain thing, and it's not that way with the other, then they're going to fight, just like the Civil War in the United States.
Okay.
I don't think they can get along with several different spots with their own agendas.
But are you going to tell them the rest of the story, Chris, that they don't really do too well with the king either? But okay,
yeah,
that's another story.
That's also
okay,
true.
We'll wait for that.
This is just one of those where once again, this text is entering into the discussion of, is centralized government good? And this is one of the arguments that is pro-monarchy. Like, look, we are, like, these tribes are being horrible to each other. They won't even respect other people that are of the same people group. There will be things that are anti-monarchy. We're going to get to those too. But this is just one argument in the, like, yay, we need centralized ruling. But with the remaining time, let's get to the truly horrific part of this scripture. So we see that a lot of the sexual violence in the story is about power and domination. It is not about sexuality. It is not really about pleasure. It is about dominance. And so what happens is, once again, the old man, kind of like Lot does in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, no, no, no. Do not infringe on my right for hospitality. I am taking care of this guest. It is my duty to protect him. Instead, I have virgin daughters, and this man has a concubine. Take them instead. And this shows the second-class status of women, that hospitality for the man trumps the property rights or even the selfhood of these women. The men do not want the women because they want to dominate and subjugate the man, because that is what they are after, power and domination. In verse 25, it says, so the man seizes his concubine and puts her out. It is a little bit unclear which man this technically is, but my notes are saying it is the natural reading to say that the Levite is acting out of self-preservation, and so he is taking his secondary wife and throwing her out of the house. We get the description that the men abused her all the night, and then by the morning, she is at the threshold of the doorstep. The disturbing part is this is showing that when they left her, she is likely alive, because the depiction is that she is crawled to the house and is literally collapsed at the door. And then the Levite opens the door and then tells her to get up, and when she doesn't move, he just puts her on his donkey and continues on his way. There is no confirmation that she is dead at any of these points.
But
so
then he cuts her up.
And then he chops her up into 12 pieces. Once again, we don't have a confirmation that she is dead yet, which is
right.
the doubly disturbing part of this story, is not only how the men of this town abuse her, but then the abuse of the Levite, who is willing to desecrate his wife's corpse and then mail it to the 12 tribes of Israel with the message, has such thing ever happened since the days the Israelites have come up from Egypt until this day? Consider it, take counsel, and speak out.
Good.
So, yeah.
What is he saying happened?
So, the implication here, so there's a few things that are kind of in the subtext, in the like cultural connotations at the time. We will see that in other parts of the scripture that actions like this are a call to arms. Specifically, like King Saul, I believe, is the one. He cuts up an ox into 12 parts and sends it to the 12 tribes, and it is basically a sacrifice to assemble the armies to get an army to attack an invading force. So this is kind of like lighting the beacon that the enemies are here. This is a call to arms for a like makeshift militia. So he is sending out a military signal with the 12 parts of his wife's body. The assumption is that he is cutting her up because she has already been sacrificed, but it is to show that he has been offended. It is not that his wife or his concubine has been offended. It's that his property was used and abused. Look what was taken from me. And I now send it to you as evidence that I have been offended.
Mm-hmm.
Gretchen and then Mary Ellen.
I just think that it's so doubly disturbing. I never thought about it that she wasn't necessarily dead. I just think we just kind of, it's really nasty. And
yeah.
Mary Ellen was next.
Yeah, Mary Ellen.
But he offered the concubine to the crowd, knowing how they were going to treat her.
Yeah. So that is why it's a symbol that he was impeded upon, is because they attempted to subjugate him, and this is the evidence. They took her in his place. Look at what has been. I was nearly violated. She was violated on my behalf.
Interesting. I wonder if Helen has any positive parts to this, Helen.
No, it's pretty awful. Terrible. Miserable.
Yeah, so if this is a call to arms, what, they're all going to go and attack that particular town where this happened? Is that what he's asking?
So this is what Sue actually read was the following 2 chapters, which is a civil war is about to break out, and the tribe of Benjamin nearly gets put out of existence because the other 11 tribes are going to attack the entire tribe of Benjamin as basically it's kind of revenge for what was imposed upon for the Levite, to defend him and his rights as a Levite.
Okay.
And there's a repetition of the story about the concubine being raped. Yeah, they say it that she was raped till she died.
Okay.
That's where I got my quote. Yeah. I was hoping we had finished with Judges. I guess
So, unfortunately, we have to descend to the depths of the disorder in order to see where the story goes. And so this is, like I said, this is probably, in my book, this is probably one of the most disturbing stories that we have in our scriptures. So this is like the level of disorder, and civil war is about to break out because of this. And so with the last 5 minutes, I want to return to the question of what's the purpose of this story? Because this is not one that I know it's easy to draw a life parallel out. I hope we are not acting as the main characters are acting. That would be horrible. So do you all have any thoughts of why the story is in here?
On a superficial way, you could say it's a Holiday Inn advertisement to make your reservations early.
Well, I think it's also a way of
or in its appeal,
king.
Or
a
bridge.
It was really bad, so they need a king.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is a bridge to getting a king.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Gary?
I'm much more comfortable. Well, that's not the way to say it. But anyway, I understand more now that this story points out the degree to which there was disrespect and a lack of any kind of honor for the Judaism or the religion. And that the fact that the priest was the one, I assume they knew he was a Levite, and they're going to treat him as with the greatest contempt possible. So that's it. Period.
Yeah.
That's very.
So yeah, it's as horrific as this story is for women, it's also almost unfortunate that women are not the point of the story. They are kind of the example of how bad it got. At the same time, it's still disturbing. And one thing that, because Gretchen and I were talking after service, and she was making a comment of like, what are we going to do with this in Bible study? The other thing that I will put out there is we're getting into the part of the story which is closer to when a lot of these stories were starting to be compiled. If you think of the arc of the stories where we're starting in Genesis, and like Sodom and Gomorrah, like I said, is kind of more in the realm of mythos, of legend, and we've come closer and closer to what we would consider more of history. We're still not using modern historical understandings of things, but it's about as close as the ancient world gets to history, which means this story was likely well known. And it would have been obvious if it was left out. Where not everything in the Bible is meant to be a positive example of what we should do, but sometimes there's stories in the Bible that are specifically things that we should not do. And the people would have likely known of the civil war that ended where the tribe of Benjamin was attacked by all the other tribes, and people would have known what started the war. And so it was likely included because people knew about it. And they are kind of recording the history of how the Davidic kingship got started. So it's likely in here, if only because people already knew it.
Oh.
And you wonder then, why did they pick that particular reason for starting the war? You know, why couldn't they have thought of some other murder or economic disaster? Why did they pick this idea that this was going to be the reason?
I'm going to guess because there are My guess is if it's not exactly this, something like this happened. Like having body parts from a woman show up to the leaders is quite memorable. And I hate to say that probably happened.
No, I'm going back to the reason for the why did the Benjaminites attack? Why did they pick that reason? A group of men, and they're after this Levite, because we're going to sodomize him. Why is that the reason? And does it have anything specific to do with the feeling about that sort of sexual activity?
Oh, that part.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was I would have to look up the one thing I didn't research was kind of the other tribes' feelings about the tribe of Benjamin. Like last time we talked about, like the tribe of Dan is kind of considered a violent bunch anyways. My guess is this was just something a habit they developed. I can't say more than that. For next week, we are going to get into the Civil War, so we can go back and kind of look at some of what was the opinions of the tribe of Benjamin. Yeah, Gretchen?
I'm thinking that as we move ahead, the tribe of Benjamin becomes very positive, and that David is from the tribe of Benjamin. And I'm wondering if it's it's a contrast in this. And I too wonder why. Was there something earlier that we missed about the tribe of Benjamin? I mean, I can't picture it. But then later on, they become like let's see, they were the tribe of Saul, weren't they?
Yeah, well, actually, if you look in the notes, it says that Saul is actually King Saul, the first king of Israel, is from this exact town where this event is happening, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It says something about Saul, though, and the way that Saul's kingship is gonna go, unfortunately. The thing is, I believe Benjamin is Joseph's little brother.
The one who was taken to the prison and substitute, I mean, I don't get why the Benjamin, I think of them as round and cuddly, but
yeah. So
little baby.
I'll try to look up some facts to see if I can get something on it, but generally speaking, the tribe of Benjamins looked at pretty well.
Yeah.
Huh. So.
Oh, I was going to ask, is this post-exilic writing?
So this is compiled this is part of the group where the Deuteronomistic historian has its fingers in the stories very clearly, that the historian is putting commentary here and there. It was likely finalized, but these stories tend to be looked at as existing long before that because they have these kind of legend qualities. Where the episodic nature of them makes it feel like they were stories that were told around a campfire, things that would have been shared one-off and then put into a compilation, which is why each of the judges, the leaders, are kind of only leaders of individual tribes, but they're kind of told that they were judging over all of Israel. That's later commentary. So these stories definitely pre-existed the exile. These stories would have been known in the lead up to the monarchy. Like I said, this is kind of pro-monarchy propaganda at this point. There's going to be will be anti-monarchy propaganda, but this one is pro-monarchy propaganda.
Okay. Gotcha.
So the last thing that I will say, because I know we're over time, but just something to think about, because bringing us into the modern day, this text was actually a point of controversy in the PCUSA a few years back, because it was chosen as the text for the Hebrew ordination exam, where every pastor has to do an ordination exam where you start with the original text, you translate it, and you have to explain your translation choices, do an explanation of what the story means and how to teach it. And this passage was chosen, and there was a lot of reasons why the ordination planning committee defended its choice, but there were many women who cited that this was an inappropriate choice because there were people who were survivors of sexual assault who were then asked to translate this, and the tests are not cheap, and they're entered into a conversation of what stories are appropriate for these kinds of exams, what stories are not appropriate for these kinds of exams, and how do we deal with stories like this that are in our scripture and yet are rather difficult to read for some people. And so because we're over time, I'm putting it out there. If you are interested in the discussion, you can Google it and read it about it. It's something to think about because this is one of the worst examples we have, but it is a question of when do we teach it? How do we teach it? How do we approach this respectfully, knowing that people are survivors of assault? And what do we do with this kind of text in general? So with that, any final thoughts about this passage for today? Yeah, Mary Ellen, is that a hand?
Accident. Oh. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope this makes thank you all for having this discussion, being willing to enter into the troubled waters. I know this can be difficult, like I said. But I do appreciate your all's thoughts and journeying into it. And I hope it makes it a little bit more digestible, even if it's still in the realm of being unsettling. But with that, shall we pray?
Yes.
All right. Loving God, when we read stories like Judges 19, we see the depravity that exists in humankind. Even while you have made us good, we know that human beings have struggled to live up to that goodness. Sometimes that goodness, excuse me, sometimes we struggle to live up to the goodness in little ways. Whether it is just a simple thing of not returning a shopping cart because we're tired and someone can take care of it, or the reality that we know situations like the one described in Judges 19 still happen in our world today. That even while we read this story with it held a little bit at a distance, we know too well that it describes some people's lived experience. And so God, today we want to lift up specifically the people in the world today who are experiencing violence. Violence at the hand of governments, violence at the hands of neighbors, violence at the hand of family who is supposed to be the one who protects them. Be with them and be the peace that goes beyond understanding. Give them hope and a way out of the situations of violence and domination. And help us be advocates so that the world may be a more peaceful place, not just in our own communities, but in the world as a whole, that we may build the kingdom of God that everyone, everywhere can experience. And so be with this group. We know many people are healing or struggling with the things in their own life, so be with them also. Be that peace as well for them in their own lives. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.